Tony Mansolino's first real test as Orioles manager failed with flying colors. So who could be the next manager of the Baltimore Orioles? We'll throw out some names coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, May 20th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to recap a seventh consecutive loss for the Orioles. This one actually a close loss. They haven't had a lot of those this season, but this one hurt more than some of the others. Not like Friday night hurt, the final game of Brandon Hyde's tenure as manager, but in a way that somewhat could have been avoided with an idiotic managerial choice from the interim guy, Tony Mansolino. We'll break down that loss. Then speaking of managers, let's run through our inaugural Locked On Orioles list of potential managerial candidates for when the Orioles presumably kind of open up this search fully here this offseason. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast. Before we get there, though, just did want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcast listening platforms. You can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed there. And if you leave a 5-star rating and a review, that really, really helps out the show. Let's get some Apple Podcast reviews. Haven't had any in a while. If there's some good ones, I'll read them out on the show as well. But that really helps out the pod. So if you'd like to leave an Apple Podcast review, that would certainly be helpful. And of course, we're right here on YouTube. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Thank you all so much for the feedback. Got a lot of it for the kind of a breaking news pod on Saturday with the Brandon Hyde news. And then finally, of course, if you want to talk ball, you want to talk about the Orioles, you want to commiserate with me about how poorly this is going, you can always email me lockedonorioles@gmail.com. So let's start with, unfortunately, another Orioles loss. The seventh consecutive loss for the O's as they fall to 15-31 through 46 games this season with a 5-4 loss in Wisconsin to the Milwaukee Brewers on Monday night in game one of a 3-game set. Now I'm going to get to the 5 things you need to know from this Orioles loss. And the first thing you need to know is Ramon Laureano just keeps on hitting for this Orioles team. The O's had him batting cleanup for the second time this season. Also had him batting cleanup in Friday night's lineup, the final lineup that Brandon Hyde put together. And listen, it's because Laureano is just swinging the bat well, and he has kind of earned it. Ramon Laureano goes 3 for 4 in this game, now hitting .272 with an .870 OPS. Only Ryan O'Hearn with his .886 OPS has a higher number on the season on this Orioles team than Ramon Laureano, who the Orioles signed to a 1-year, $5 million deal to be a bench outfielder in the offseason. And he has been full body of work, their second best hitter so far this year. That's kind of wild that that's happened. But Laureano started the season just ice cold. He couldn't hit lefties, which is what he was here to do. And then, if you remember, he had that 2-homer game back on April 19th. And in the next month after that, Laureano's been red hot. These stats don't even include the 3 hits that he compiled on Monday night. But in that month since the 2-homer game, hitting .282 with a .342 on base and a .549 slugging, good for a .152 WRC plus. You add in the 2 singles and the solo home run, his 6th of the year that Laureano hit on Monday. I mean, he's creeping towards 300 in his last month. He's just been fantastic, and he's playing a good defensive outfield in both corner spots. He can play center field for you if you want as well. He's been a really good addition to this team. You know, if the Orioles were, well, I'd like to say 31-15 instead of 15-31, but even if the Orioles right now were, I don't know, had 23 wins and they were kind of, scratching things along at 23-23, we'd be talking about Laureano as a much bigger piece kind of holding this team together. Unfortunately, here on May 20th, the way we talk about Ramon Laureano is, hey, this ended up being so far a nice signing. And hey, it looks like the Orioles are going to be able to trade him and get something for him at the deadline, because this certainly looks like a team that at least is going to sell its rentals. And The best comparison I had from last year's deadline is Mark Canha, another right-handed hitting, kind of lefty mashing outfielder who was traded from the Tigers to the Giants last year at the deadline. Now, Canha had just a 101 WRC plus. Laureano's up above a 130, and Canha is not the outfield defender that Laureano is. So Ramon Laureano is a more valuable player than Canha. What the Tigers got was 21-year-old right-handed pitching prospect Eric Silva, a 40 future value prospect over at Fangraphs. Got a huge spin curveball, solid fastball velocity, and kind of a double-A arm at the time of the trade. So the Orioles could at least get a double-A or triple-A good stuff relief prospect for Ramon Laureano. And hey, a guy that could maybe even help you in 2026. I think that would be worth it if the O's could swing a deal like that at the deadline. Second thing you need to know from this one is that Cedric Mullins had what could have been a huge swing in this game and in this Orioles season. Steps to the plate with runners on second and third and one out. Orioles trailing 4-1 in the top of the seventh. And the Brewers go to the bullpen. They bring in right-hander Nick Mears, who's been outstanding, has a sub-1 ERA this year. Mears comes in to face Mullins, and Mullins said, hey, Brewers, bad move. He absolutely obliterates a line drive 3-run homer over the right field wall to tie the game at 4. Mullins hit it 107.9 miles an hour off the bat. Would have been a home run in all 30 ballparks. And for Mullins, he becomes the first Oriole to hit double digits. 10 home runs on the season for Mullins. What was actually a little bit surprising, I hadn't even realized, Kevin Brown said it on the broadcast Monday after the homer, Mullins is actually on a better home run pace than he was during the 30-30 season that he had back in 2021. He's hitting for more power this year. We know May had kind of been a disaster for the first couple of weeks, but he's turning it back on, and that is certainly important for the Orioles. Third thing you need to know from this one is that Dean Kramer was okay, I guess, in this game. Like, he was just kind of he was That's how I feel about this start. 5 1/3 innings, a 4-run ball from Kramer. He allows 9 hits, strikes out 6, 2 walks, no homers, 97 pitches for the Oriole right-hander, 6 hard hit balls by the Brewers hitters against him. Like, he couldn't get the big last out in the second, allowed a couple of big hits. Brewers scratched across 3 runs in the second. They get a run off him in the 5th. He allows a leadoff triple in the 6th, comes out of the game. Sir Anthony Dominguez did a good job of getting out of a jam there and keeping it 4-1, which allowed the Orioles to then tie the game in the top half of the next inning. I mean, he mixed his pitches. It was a lot of cutters. His splitter was a little better. His command was fine. This is better than some of the bad starts we saw in April from Dean Kramer. It's nothing like those 2 7-inning great starts we saw to begin the month of May. This is just a kind of an ass start you see from a guy like Kramer. You pitch into the 6th, 4 runs. It's not quality. It's not bad. It's just kind of okay. And when your offense is rolling, 5 1/3, 4 runs, you're like, hey, we'll take that. When your offense is struggling, it's like, there's traffic on the bases every inning. It's just, it is what it is. Again, he's not losing his rotation spot. It's just kind of Fourth thing you need to know from this one is it was another tough outing for Yennier Cano, who came in the 8th inning in a 4-4 game, retired the first 2 hitters, had a 1-2 count on Bryce Terang, was looking like he was going to get a 1-2-3 inning, and then he walked him. He couldn't find the strikeout pitch, couldn't find the put-away pitch. He walks him. Terang with great speed. Cano doesn't hold runners well, so Terang steals second, and then he gets 2 strikes on William Contreras, and you're like, okay, he could get out of this, and Contreras just sneaks a hard-hit grounder into center field for the go-ahead RBI single to put the Brewers up 5-4, and it continues a bad stretch for Cano here in May. The last 7 outings for Yennier Cano out of the Orioles bullpen, not good. Shield your eyes. He had not allowed an earned run all season coming into the stretch. Last 7 outings, 5 1/3 innings, 8 hits, 9 earned runs, 7 strikeouts, 5 walks, and 3 home runs. I would think that Tony Mansolino and the Orioles coaching staff will move him out of like the highest leverage role for now. Like, he might get the 6th inning instead of the 8th the next time he pitches. You still want to rely on Cano, and you probably see someone like Brian Baker more so move into those even higher leverage spots. Now, he did try to do things differently. He mixed his pitches more. He actually threw 5 different pitches. We saw more 4-seam fastballs. He threw his first cutter in a while, which was a new pitch he kind of introduced in spring training this year. But once he got those 2 strikes on Terang, he just kind of wasn't competitive, didn't have the put-away pitch, and it hurt him once again, and he gives up a run in these games, which are such razor thin margins, even in games like Monday when the Orioles are in it. They can't have any let down from the bullpen, and Dominguez had a solid outing, and Soto threw a really good scoreless seventh to keep it tied, and Cano just couldn't do it, and that's where the Orioles got to. But they had a chance at the top of the ninth. But the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 5-4 loss to the Brewers on Monday is that Tony Mansolino, the interim manager for the Orioles, managing his third game on Monday, had his first managerial disaster. Didn't really have a chance to have one Saturday or Sunday because the O's were blown out in both games by the Nats. But a huge time came up. Top of the ninth inning, Trevor McGill, the Brewers closer, is on, and he walks Cedric Mullins on 4 pitches. None of the pitches were very close. Walks him on 4 pitches to lead off the ninth. So you got speedy Cedric Mullins on first base in a 1-run game. And Trevor McGill, he is so big. He's like 6'8". He's huge. Takes a long time to get to the plate. He's kind of like Felix Bautista, where his stuff is great, but he can't hold runners. Like, guys will just steal bases at him or on him at will. Base runners are 29 for 33 when stealing when Trevor McGill is pitching. And you combine that with a great base stealer with great speed like Cedric Mullins, he should automatically be at second base. Now, Dylan Carlson's at the plate. This is not, your most feared hitter. Carlson's still without a hit at the big league level this year. And if you want to bunt eventually to move the runner over, okay, you know what? I don't love it, but fine, whatever. Obviously, Carlson's not a big threat. You've got Adley Rutschman waiting on deck, and then Jackson Holliday. Okay, you want to bunt, whatever. But what you need to do is know that Cedric Mullins is pretty much automatically going to steal second. He could go on the first pitch and steal second base. You let Carlson take a pitch, allow Mullins to steal second, even if it's a called strike. You still have some leeway to get down a bunt before you get to 2 strikes. You send Cedric Mullins on the first pitch. He would have easily stolen the bag. Then, if you want to ask Carlson to bunt with Mullins at second and try to get Mullins to third with 1 out, so then you don't even need a hit to tie the game, like, all right, fine. I'm not going to love that move, but I understand the logic behind it. Instead, Mansolino, I would assume, unless Carlson did it on his own, puts the bunt sign down on the first pitch. So A, you're not allowing Mullins to steal second base, which he would have, again, easily done. And B, that's not a smart bunt decision. There are not many sack bunts that are smart. To me, the only sack bunt that is smart is extra innings, zombie runner at second. You put up the 0. You are the home team. You put up the 0 in the top of the inning. And in the bottom half, 1 run wins it. You have the guy at second. You bunt him to third with 1 out. That gives you statistically a better chance to score just 1 run. Otherwise, bunts do not do that. When you have a runner, this is a run expectancy table in baseball. When you have nobody out and a runner at first, you are expected to score about 0.83 runs in an inning. When you have a runner at second and 1 out, you're expected to score about 0.64 runs in an inning. You are expected to score a run more often with a runner at first, no outs, than a runner at second, 1 out. That's why the sack bunt after you get a leadoff man on first is stupid. It takes your ability to score 1 run and brings it down, and your ability to score multiple runs, it takes it down even further. And when you take into the context of Mullins is going to automatically steal this base because of his speed and who the pitcher is, just let him take off. And the other thing is, Dylan Carlson, 1 career sack bunt in the major leagues. Again, even if you wanted to do it once he got to second and bunt him to third, like, okay, fine. But this isn't also the best guy you want up there to lay it down. Instead, of course, what does he do? Tries to bunt on the first pitch, pops it up in foul territory. The Contreras, the catcher, makes the play, and there's 1 out. And what happens 2 pitches later with Adley at the plate? Oh, yeah. Mullins takes off and easily steals second base. It was on a 100-mile-per-hour fastball, and that didn't matter. Mullins easily stole the bag. If you just let him do that on the first pitch with Carlson up there, who knows if Carlson would have gotten the bunt down, right? He might have still popped it up, and it might have still ended up with a runner at second, 1 out for Adley. Adley and Jackson both fly out. The game is over. The Orioles don't tie the game. I get it. It may not have changed the outcome, but the process has to be better. And if you are Tony Mansolino, as we'll get to, you have a chance to get this full-time job. You can't be making idiotic decisions like that. I mean, again, you can rail on Brandon Hyde all you want. Didn't really bunt a lot. Definitely wouldn't have done something like that. I mean, that's like baseball in 2025 101, not to bunt in that situation. And especially when Mullins is going to easily take second base by himself. I could not believe it. And Ben McDonald's talking about it. Like, he was talking about the bunt, but he was like, hey, I would take a pitch. I would get Mullins to second and then try to bunt him to third. And again, still not in love with that, because even if you get one run, okay, you're still tied going into the bottom of the ninth. I'd rather play for the big inning, but whatever. You want to try and tie it. Your offense is struggling. Fine by me once you let Mullins get to second. They did not let him do that. And here's the other thing. This Orioles team can't hit with runners in scoring position. Why are you going to give away a free out and trust that you're going to get a hit with runners in scoring position? I could not believe that decision, honestly, made by Mansolino. Like, I am still in utter shock that the Orioles and he decided to do that. And this is going to sound like a little bit of an overreaction, but for a guy that, again, is the interim manager and is already behind the eight ball, like, he would have to do some great things down the stretch this year to be in strong consideration to get this full-time managerial job heading into next year. That is just your first big decision as manager. To make such a boneheaded move, it takes him out of the running almost completely for me. So the question becomes, okay, who is in that running? We'll talk about some internal candidates and kind of some veteran guys that I know some people are calling for. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And for me, it's really all about the easy collaboration, right? I'm almost at my 1-year wedding anniversary now. And when you get married, one thing you don't think about initially is, hey, there's a lot of, monetary involvement, financial involvement here as well. And managing money with your partner is now smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So the Orioles lose again on Monday night. They drop their 7th in a row, and they are 0-3 under interim manager Tony Mansolino after Brandon Hyde was fired by the Orioles after a 15-28 start on Saturday morning. So let's take a very early look at some potential candidates that the Orioles could bring in as their manager. And let's start with the in-house options and the veteran options, right? Because it could go to an in-house guy. And again, as I mentioned, Tony Mansolino's got the job right now. He was a minor league manager for a while in Cleveland. He's been on the Orioles big league coaching staff since 2021. If he really finds a way with this team at 15-31 now to turn this thing around and get them into the postseason, there's a really good chance he could get the job. If he rallies these guys around to do that, it is absolutely possible. Now, after seeing that decision in the 9th inning on Monday night, I'm not sure if I'm really behind that, but there's a lot of guys in his corner. I've heard a lot of baseball people talk about how well-liked he is in the game. So it's a possibility. Otherwise, in-house, Buck Britton, I think, certainly will get an interview. Britton, who is in his first year on the big league staff, he was just kind of a general major league coach. Now, with the shuffling, he's been promoted to be the third base coach for the rest of the year. And, of course, was a manager in the Orioles minor league system since 2018. 1 year in Delmarva, 2 years in AA Bowie, and then 3 years as the manager in AAA Norfolk before he got promoted. He knows all of these young players super, super well. They know, they respect him. He would definitely be probably at the top of the list of the internal candidates and around the top of the list of just any candidates out there. I would think Robinson Chirinos might get some consideration. Orioles brought him in as the first-year bench coach under Brandon Hyde this year, and it is his first big league coaching job. They think he might have a bright future. Maybe a little early for him to get a big league managerial role, but he's certainly at least going to talk about it. And then you have to throw Anthony Sanders in the mix as well. He's been the Orioles' first base coach since 2020. He did manage the Rockies rookie ball team in their system for 3 years from 2013 to 2015. So he's done a little managerial work before. And if he's interested, you'd have to think he'd at least talk with the Orioles about it. Now, I know people are going to throw around this thing. Oh, there's inexperienced manager. They need a guy who's done something, won something, an old manager. Like I would be shocked if someone like a Dusty Baker, a Buck Showalter, a Joe Madden were brought in by the Orioles. Like, Dusty's retired. I guess Madden and Buck aren't, but it's just not going to happen. Like, we got to stop with those comments. It's not going to happen. They could bring in an older guy. I'm not saying that. But Joe Madden, who's just been so butting heads publicly with GMs he's worked with, and Buck Showalter, honestly, behind the scenes, butts head with GMs he works with. It happened in Baltimore. He tries to take over the organization for himself. That's just not going to happen, especially if Mike Elias is still here and playing a big role in hiring the next manager, which is not guaranteed, but seems like a probability probably still. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. But if the Orioles were to bring in someone of the more veteran, I guess, quote unquote, old school ilk, I mean, obviously I'd love to see a Bruce Bochy, but he seems to be either staying in Texas or retiring. I really like Don Mattingly. He's 64 years old. He's currently in his third season as the Blue Jays bench coach. Of course, he was a great player for the Yankees. Then he managed the Dodgers for a number of years. Then he managed the Marlins for 7 seasons. Before he was the 2020 NL Manager of the Year. He took the Dodgers kind of finally back to the playoffs in the 2010s. Never got past the NLDS in the postseason, so that's one thing. But I do like Don Mattingly, but I can't see them hiring like a old school. It's not going to gel. Even if the Orioles move on from Mike Elias this offseason and have a full scale change, and David Rubenstein is now kind of really has his hands dirty making these decisions. I'll tell you right now, it's not going to be Joe Madden. It's not going to be Buck Showalter. Like, you got to stop with that. That's not going to happen. It's more possible a guy in like the Bochy, Bob Melvin ilk, like the Don Mattingly ilk. Those guys are possible. They're not bringing out Buck. They're not bringing out Joe Madden. It's not, I don't know what the like lore of those guys is at this point. It's not going to happen. It's really not going to happen. There's a lot of exciting guys out there, though. And when you think about it right now, there are already 3 managerial openings, right? The Rockies and the Pirates both fired their managers even before the Orioles fired Brandon Hyde this year. And it is inarguable that if those are the 3 open managerial jobs at the end of the season, by far the most sought after by candidates will be the Orioles over the current state of the Pirates and the Rockies. And even if there are some more firings in there, right? Even if the Angels are like, we're done with Ron Washington, or, I don't even know who could potentially be on John Schneider in Toronto, right? Like that's a possibility of a guy who could be on the hot seat at this point. But Brian Snitker, they're getting maybe a little tired of him in Atlanta or whoever it may be. The Orioles still could be a top 2, maybe number 1 job that's available this offseason. So they should have their pick of who they can bring in. So, yeah, they have the internal candidates. They have the veteran guys. They're all certainly possible. Let's talk about the more probable candidates, the guys who would come in from outside, the risers in the managerial game, the hot names people are on. Who are some of these guys around the league who the Orioles could target with some interviews and potentially bring them in? Talk about that to finish off the show coming up next. So let's talk through some managerial names. This list is going to change, right? It is May 20th. This hiring at the earliest would probably not happen for another 5 months at the absolute earliest, in like mid to late October. More than likely, you're pushing closer to 6 months before the Orioles would truly make this hire. So this list is going to change. Other jobs are going to open. Other names are going to come out. But kind of scouring around the league, these are the names, the guys who I think I would be interested in, and I think the Orioles would be interested in too. I've got 6 names here. I have them loosely in order of where I would power rank them, of who I would want the most among these names. And let's start with who is right now on May 20th, 2025, my top choice for Orioles new manager. And that is Rodney Linares. He is the 47-year-old Tampa Bay Rays bench coach, and he has held that position under manager Kevin Cash since 2023. And he's been on the Rays staff. He was hired as their third base coach in 2019 when Matt Quatraro, their previous bench coach, was hired by the Royals as their manager. They promoted Linares to that role, and Kevin Cash, seen as like a slam dunk top 5 manager in the game right now, he's been learning under him for a while. Now, Linares had a brief pro career and then began coaching in the Astros system at age 21 all the way back in 1999. He was a hitting coach in the Dominican Summer League. He is Dominican for 6 years. Then he was the hitting coach in low A, and then he started managing. He managed in rookie ball for 3 years. He managed in low A for 2 years, including in 2011 when Mike Elias arrived from the Cardinals to join the Astros as a scout. He was the high A manager for 3 years. Then he moved up to be the double A manager for 3 years. And then finally was the Astros triple A manager in 2018 before he was then hired in 2019 by the Rays to be their third base coach. So from 2011 to 2018, while Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal and all those guys were in the front office, Rodney Linares was a upper level minor league manager in the Astros system. So obviously that is a big connection of if Elias and those guys are still here, they know him well, but also it's a great track record. He's a guy who his name was thrown around for some jobs last offseason. He also has some other managerial experience. He managed the Dominican Republic team at the 2023 World Baseball Classic. That is a big job with a lot of big personalities and big talents in that clubhouse. His dad has been playing, coaching, or working the front office for the Astros since 1973. Like, this is a baseball family, a baseball guy. He's in his 40s, kind of a good time to hire a first-time manager. He's worked under Kevin Cash. He knows Elias and Sig with the Astros. To me, this is my top candidate right now, and I think it would be a slam dunk hire if the Orioles were able to get him. The next one is going to make some people feel a certain type of way. My next candidate would be Ryan Flaherty. This is not a joke. My next candidate is Ryan Flaherty. He's 38 years old. He's now in his second season as the Chicago Cubs bench coach, working under Craig Counsell, who many believe is the top manager in Major League Baseball right now. We know Ryan Flaherty well. He played at Vanderbilt, was taken by the Orioles in the 2011 Rule 5 draft, and played for the O's for 6 years as a utility man from 2012 to 2017, basically all the peak years of the Buck Showalter era. He's kind of a cult hero Orioles player who wasn't really that good, but people love Ryan Flaherty. I like Ryan Flaherty. I've got a signed Fathead I won from Masson somewhere behind me of Ryan Flaherty, just kind of a funny player, but he's turned into a great coach. As soon as he retired, he left the Orioles. He played briefly for the Braves and for Cleveland and then retired after 2019. Immediately, the Padres hired him as a development coach and an advanced scout, and he just worked his way up the Padres staff. He even managed the Padres for a few games in June 2022 when Bob Melvin got COVID. He was promoted to Padres bench coach in 2023, and then he took the job with the Cubs in 2024, and he got some manager interviews last winter. He, of course, has the Orioles connection. It is not out of the realm of possibility that Ryan Flaherty could be the Orioles' next manager. Another name I just want to throw in there is another former player. That's Daniel Descalso. He's also 38 years old. He's currently in his second season as the Cardinals bench coach under Ali Marmol. You probably know him as a player. He was a third-round pick by the Cardinals back in 2007. 2007 was the first year that Mike Elias was working for the Cardinals on the draft as a scout, so probably had something to do with the Cardinals picking Daniel Descalso. And then he played in the big leagues from 2010 to 2019 with the Cardinals, Rockies, D-backs, and Cubs. Worked in baseball ops for the D-backs in 2023, and then the Cardinals hired him back as their bench coach for 2024. Kind of lower on my list, but because he has that Elias connection, is kind of definitely a rising name right now managerially, someone the O's would at least take a peek on. Here's a name that's going to elicit a response, but I'm going to put him on this list, and that is Carlos Beltran. Yes, I know that Carlos Beltran, one of the great players in our game, played 20 years in the big leagues, Mets, Royals, Yankees, Cardinals, Astros, Rangers, Giants. You know Carlos Beltran. He was signed by the Astros in 2017 and won the World Series with that team. The book Astro Ball talks a lot about how he was such an important clubhouse leader, that Astros team. Well, a couple years later, it turned out he was also kind of the leader of the trash can banging scheme that the Astros went through. Before that came out, though, he interviewed for the Yankees manager job in December of 2018 that eventually went to Aaron Boone. And then if you remember, Carlos Beltran was actually hired as Mets manager back in November of 2019. But then a month later, the trash can banging scandal broke, and he was fired in January. He spent 2 months of the offseason as Mets manager and then was fired. He was working as a Yankees TV game analyst in 2022, then was hired by the Mets in the front office in 2023 as a special assistant to GM Billy Epler, I believe, and I think is still in that role with the Mets, has been there for the past 3 years. So is still working in baseball. Teams clearly thought, the Yankees and the Mets and others thought he would be a great manager. He obviously has that relationship with Elias from the 2017 Astros. if the Orioles would be willing to take a chance on a guy that baseball's not too pleased with at the moment, maybe that's the kind of move that really does shake things up. And I think people thought he was going to be a great manager, and I think one day may still get that chance. I mean, he is 48 years old at this point, but I'm not saying I would love it. I would at least consider it. It would certainly give the Orioles an edge in that clubhouse. I mean, look how it's worked for the other people involved in that scheme. I know the Red Sox are a mess sometimes, but Alex Cora seems to be a great manager. He was heavily involved in that. He's the Red Sox manager. AJ Hinch has the Tigers looking like the best non-Dodgers team in baseball right now. And he was, of course, involved in that in Houston. So I'm not completely against Carlos Beltran maybe being a name out there. Two more for you. The next would be David Ross, 48-year-old, currently not working in baseball, but he spent 15 big league seasons as a catcher in the 2000s. Braves, Reds, Dodgers, Red Sox, Cubs, Pirates, Padres, of course, won the 2016 World Series with the Chicago Cubs. Then the Cubs hired him as a special assistant after he retired in 2017. He did some game analyst work on ESPN. And then the Cubs hired him as their manager. In October of 2019, he managed 4 seasons for the Cubs from 2020 until he was fired in November of 2023. He made the expanded playoffs in 2020. The Cubs lost to the Marlins in the first round. And then they won 71, 74, and 83 games the next 3 years, missed the playoffs in all 3, and Ross got fired. He had a .480 winning percentage as an MLB manager with the Cubs. But the connection is, first of all, he was a player when Brandon Hyde was a coach in Chicago, but more importantly, Ken Rosenthal reported over the offseason that the Orioles were interested in David Ross to be their bench coach when the Orioles let go of Freddie Gonzalez before they had hired Robinson Chirinos. There was reported interest there. Now, we don't know if there was ever a formal interview or anything, but Rosenthal reported that actually the year before, the Yankees were interested in David Ross as their bench coach, but Ross did not pursue the interview with the Yankees because he said he would only come back if he was offered a manager job. So he's managed 4 years in the big leagues. He's well-liked. The Orioles clearly are interested in him. Maybe if the manager seat is now open, they reach back out to David Ross. I think it would be at least an interesting move for them to make. And then the final one is another Astros connection. That is Omar Lopez. He is the 48-year-old Astros bench coach. He's been in that role for 2 years. He had a brief minor league career before he joined the Astros as a scout and a coach all the way back in 1999, kind of similar to the Rodney Linares track. He was a hitting coach in the Venezuelan Summer League for the Astros until 2007. He managed there in 2008. Then from 2008 to 2019, Omar Lopez managed at every level but AAA in the Astros system. So it was there the entire time that Elias and Sig were there. And then the Astros promoted him to be the Major League first base coach in 2020. Then when Dusty Baker retired, Joe Espada was hired as manager. Lopez was promoted to be Espada's bench coach in 2024. And he also, like Linares, has some WBC experience. He managed Team Venezuela at the 2023 World Baseball Classic. Again, another team with a lot of personalities, a lot of great talent that it had to be a certain job to manage in that clubhouse. And another guy I'm definitely intrigued by. He seems to be more of an Astros lifer. Again, Linares left. He's still there. So it might be even harder to pry him away from Houston, which I think makes Lopez a little less likely to take the job, but still definitely an interesting candidate the Orioles certainly should go after. Again, I'm all in on the Rodney Linares train, but there's some other names out there that I think are interesting. And let me know right here in the Locked On Orioles comment section on the YouTube page. Let me know in the comments of this video who you think, who would be your top candidate. Maybe give me your top 3 candidates who you think the Orioles should reach out to be the next manager when they kind of make this full hiring pitch in the offseason and then heading into 2026. But that will do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. The Orioles, somewhat unfortunately, will play some baseball again tonight. Sometimes it feels like, they could not play the baseball if they didn't want to. It hurts to watch, but they're going to play the baseball. So that's going to happen, and it'll be against the Brewers again, because that is how series work in baseball, where you play a team more than once. It'll be a 7:40 start on Masson 2. The starter for the Brewers is 23-year-old lefty Logan Henderson, who's made 2 big league starts, and they've both been very good. We'll see if he can keep it up. He was a 4th-round pick for the Brewers in 2023. The Orioles had Chase McDermott here on their taxi squad. Looks like Keegan Aiken is going to start the game tonight for the Orioles as an opener. He'll go 1 or 2 innings, and then Chase McDermott is kind of going to be the bulk pitcher behind him. McDermott, who, of course, made the start in game 2 of the Orioles doubleheader last week against the Twins and was not great in his 3 innings of work. We'll try and pitch a little bit more than that for the Orioles. And McDermott, he might get to hold that spot because remember, there is an open rotation spot right now with Kyle Gibson being DFA'd on Sunday. If McDermott pitches well, he could remain on the team and remain in that 5th starter spot, at least for the time being. And then I'll be back tomorrow recapping game 2 between the Orioles and the Brewers and talking about how Chase McDermott's second appearance of the season went. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.